I will very rapidly try to make a parallel between blue tongue and Schmallenberg, which has emerged, as you know, in Europe and in France, with African horse sickness. So although horses are not cheap, I think we all agree with that, for sure. The virus and the biology of the viruses are quite similar. And I think we all agree that if African horse sickness would emerge in Europe, in Spain, for example, or in the UK, not in France, we would be in a terrible mess. And that's why I will try to show you that we have already seen that for other diseases. Very rapidly, I will show you that there are very similar. There are a lot of similarities between blue tongue and African horse sickness. I will very describe rapidly emergence of blue tongue in Europe and Schmallenberg, because some people here are know very well horse problems, but not necessarily cattle or sheep problems. And we'll see what we can conclude concerning African horse sickness. So, as you know, these two viruses belong to the same family, to the same genus. We know a lot of things about African horse sickness, and I would like to thank Peter Mertens, who is here for this film. And what is very funny is that we know a lot of things about the virus, but we still don't know how blue tongue serotype 8 emerged in Europe, how Schmallenberg, which is not an RB virus, but emerged in Europe. And there are many things we don't know about the biology and the epidemiology, but at the molecular level, we know a lot of things. Concerning the number of serotypes, you know that we have 9 serotypes of African horse sickness. But for blue tongue, for example, the number is increasing, and for the moment we are somewhere between 27 for sure, 29, and probably 30, 31. So viruses like taxis, they increase every day. Yes. So you have here the biological cycle of African horse sickness and blue tongue, and you all know that they are transmitted by mating midges. And as it has been said, there are more than 1,300 or 400 species of Curicoides, and we know nothing or very few things on the relationships between viruses and Curicoides. You know that these two viruses are very similar. They are viral hemorrhagic fever, and we saw fantastic data and films about African horse sickness and things, and it is absolutely similar to blue tongue in terms of pathogeny. Of course, the morbidity rate and mortality rate are a bit different. Concerning the world distribution, you have here a map with the world distribution of blue tongue, and now you know that Europe is also infected and enzootically, I don't know if this is very English, by blue tongue virus. Concerning African horse sickness, you know that this is an African disease which is present in Africa and which has left Africa. And in fact, what is very funny is each other, we didn't know that we would put pictures of each other in our talk. So, and as it has been said, African horse sickness has emerged in Europe, and I had the chance to work with many people, in particular with my two friends here. So, concerning emergence of blue tongue, before 1998, Europe was free of blue tongue, and personally I had a lot of problems to explain to my director general at that time that we had to work on these diseases. They all say, oh, B viruses is stupid viruses, nobody cares with that. It was the same thing with foot and mouth disease. Now things have changed, as you know, thanks to these emergencies. And also there were 11 introductions of blue tongue virus from 1998 to 2006 with different serotypes emerging in Europe, as you can see. And in 2006, the situation was like that. You had serotype 2, 4, and 16 in Corsica, so I'm talking about France. Corsica still belongs to France for the moment. Yes, I think so. And in 2006, we had this incredible event with the emergence of this new virus, serotype 8. Nobody knew nothing about serotype 8. In the north of Europe, which is not known as being a tropical area, in Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany, with a new clinical pattern on cattle, which was very surprising because blue tongue was, in general, a disease of sheep. So end of 2007, the situation was like that. So incredible spread. Now, everybody knows that, but believe me, at that time, it was absolutely incredible. With many serotypes, I have no time to go into details. So we have a film here which shows you the emergence of blue tongue serotype 8 from Belgium to France. In 2006, we had 7 cases. 2007, 40,000 cases. 2008, 38,000 cases. Now we are in winter, January, February, you see here. So the culicoides are frozen, they cannot fly anymore. Fine, we can rest. And now, spring 2008, and we have serotype 8 continuing the spread, and a gift to my Spanish friend, BTV1, coming from the south, with an area near Bordeaux where you have the wine, and you have BTV1 and BTV8 at the same time, as you can see here on the map. We have also BTV1 in Brittany, which was absolutely surprising to have blue tongue in Brittany also. After 2008, as there was no vaccine, as you know, available except live attenuated vaccines, the company has to have time to develop inactivated vaccines because you cannot produce a vaccine in 1 week. I remember I had a meeting with farmers and the Minister of Agriculture, and one farmer said, "Oh, no problem, we give you 5 million euros and the next week you will have a vaccine." This is a bit more complicated than that, and they don't have money, so this is another reason. So anyway, the vaccine were produced. We vaccinated all ruminants, the domestic ruminants, sheep, cattle, and goats. And in 2012, we recovered the free status. So the situation was like that. In 2013, you have a map of Europe because all Europe was infected, the north of Europe. The vaccination was put in place. BTV8 disappeared. There were still some serotypes in Andalusia and in Italy. We isolated in Corsica serotype 1 coming from Sardinia because there are only 12 kilometers between Sardinia and Corsica by the wind. And there were also some serotypes which have been identified in the north of Europe, like serotype 6, serotype 11, which were very strange and probably had a vaccine origin, live vaccine origin, as this has been shown by Peter's team in Pirbright. 2014, we isolated the BTV27 new serotype in goats in Corsica, and now we have nothing to do. So it's fine, fantastic, and yes. But in fact, we had to go back to the future with emergence in August, September 2015 in the center of France. From this ram, we isolated BTV8. And now, in December, end of December, the situation is like that because we're in winter. We think we're in winter. And so all the center of France is infected. We have something like more than 150 cases of blue tongue serotype 8, which has re-emerged, and which is probably the same virus which was circulating at a low level. Nobody has never seen this virus, and now it has re-emerged. The situation in Europe is like that, with also serotype 4 coming from the east part of European Union. Concerning Schmallenberg, this is another business. This virus was isolated in 2011 in the town of Schmallenberg. This is the blue point you see for the people who are not good in geography like me. And the people, the colleagues from FLI, Friedrich Loeffler Institute in Germany, they have used a metagenomic approach, which is a new way for detecting viruses. And they have detected these new viruses nobody knows. Here I show you a map with spread of Schmallenberg, which is very similar to blue tongue from December 2011 to April 2012, and you see all the cases, so exactly the same picture as for blue tongue. Culicoides, yes, Schmallenberg is transmitted by culicoides, so this is exactly the same thing. So you have the situation here in 2013. Now the surveillance is not so acute, so we don't know exactly where Schmallenberg is. We know that Schmallenberg is present in Germany, it is present in France. UK, I don't know, but probably it is circulating at low level. Spain, probably also in Europe. So you see that the area of infection is very, very wide. You know that this virus induces neonatal abnormality, like you can see here, but also arthrogryposis, hydranencephaly syndrome with lesion like that. When you have a new virus, you really need to have a new tool of diagnosis, and we developed this ELISA. As Jose said, it is very important to have very fast, cheap, easy-to-use methods. And also vaccines were developed by Merial, by MSD, and I think Zoetis now has a vaccine, inactivated vaccine against Schmallenberg. So what are the consequences and the application for the horse industry, and in particular concerning African horse sickness? So the first thing would be the detection, which is of course very important. So if I go back to blue tongue, At that time, in 2007, we were only 3 in the lab, and we had more than 30,000 outbreaks. I remember I had to go to the Prime Minister's office, and there were one advisor of the Prime Minister who said, okay, I'm not a vet, I knew nothing, this virus, this is complicated, but we sent cattle from the center of France to Italy, a bit of Spain, but Italy in majority, and the business is about 1 billion euros. We cannot use 1 billion euros, so do what you want, but we cannot. It was absolutely clear. But it was complicated to, with no job, nothing, just do with you. So we decided to use the regional labs, network of labs we have in France. And the first point was to develop methods, of course. And we produced this PCR method. Now there are many other PCR methods which are used, but at that time we used this one. And very rapidly, we have transferred these methods to more than 60 labs. So each lab were able to very rapidly test the animals to be sent to Italy. And we have sent very, very, very few virus to Italy, a bit in Spain, but very few, very few. So everything was under control, more or less. And we did exactly the same thing for Schmallenberg, because then Schmallenberg arrives. This was exactly the same business. As Louis Kevin, who is the French CVO, said, when you have a new virus, immediately the border closes. So you have to show to your partners that you control the situation. So you have to test a lot of samples, and that's what we did with Schmallenberg. Concerning African horse sickness, this is of course not an exhaustive list, but a lot of tests have been developed. And as José said, or Mehdi, we all agree, the situation is very different from what we knew in 87, 89, and so on. We have very good tools now, and I really think that the laboratory diagnosis is not a major issue. Of course, it has still to be improved, but this is not the major point. Concerning the control management and vaccination, because I think, like many people, that vaccination is the first tool to control and eradicate the disease. A lot of things have been said about live vaccine. I fully agree with that, so I will not go into details because we all agree. Okay, fine. The problem is that as we have live vaccine, we have not inactivated vaccine because Ron Mérieux at that time, now Mérieux, has not produced this vaccine anymore, and it was only against one serotype, serotype 4. So if tomorrow we have serotype 5, we would be in a situation with no vaccine. There was a problem with live vaccine. Alan has shown and published that there was some reassortment in South Africa, so this is also a problem. There were different prototype of vaccine, of course, but now we have to have studies to go to the licensing authorization and say, okay, fine, this vaccine works very well, which is not the case at the moment. There is a question of vaccine bank and all the problem of the regulation concerning the market authorization of the vaccine. So for the moment, we don't have that. Another thing which is not linked to African horse sickness, but to the horse industry in general, is to know if new infectious agent, and in particular new viruses, could be present. You know that there was new blue-tongue virus, for example, serotype 25 in Switzerland. In 2008, nobody knew this virus was existing. 26, isolated by Peter's team in Kuwait. 27 in Corsica, and there was now 28, 29, and others. So for horses, there were new viruses like Peruvian horse sickness identified by Peter's teams, equine encephalitis virus, which is not really new, but which is spreading, Hendra virus in 94, which is not a long time ago, a new equine PG virus in horses, so all the things are changing also. So we have to take that into account. Of course, the virus like avian flu is a good example of the evolution of virus and pathogenicity. So we all have to take that into account. Of course, the vector surveillance, vector competence, vector surveillance, all these things have been said, but this is very important. And for African horse sickness, we knew very few things about that. I've almost finished. And one funny thing is that when I went to Google and typed biting midge funny blood meal, I found this picture, but I found Peter's picture. So Peter, I don't understand. So if I summarize, early detection, vaccination tool, vector surveillance, and that's what we'll do this afternoon. And I would like to thank everybody for your attention. I would like also to thank the people working with me for many years now. And thank you for your attention. Thank you. So now I open the discussion for a very short time because we are out of time. So do you have any question, any comments, criticism, everything? Yes, Simon.
Just one comment about the vaccination strategy. With the blue tongue 8 outbreak and Schmallenberg, we were effectively able to wait and see what the pathogenicity was of those viruses. We didn't actually respond in the first year they actually came into the countries involved. We don't have that luxury with African horse. So I think a lot of the discussion should be based around exactly how we make that decision and how we decide whether things are going to overwinter or not, because that's the key question.
You can, because in fact, to be honest, nobody has understood.
That is not unusual. So what I'm saying is it's a comment rather than a question, but what I'm saying is that basically because of the higher pathogenicity of African horse sickness, we will be making decisions as it comes in rather than having the luxury, as we did with BTV8 and Schmallenberg, to wait and see how pathogenic the virus is before making a decision as to whether or not a vaccine is a viable economic alternative.
I think everybody agrees with that, yes? Yeah. Yes. Richard?
I guess a question for Javier. With your collaboration with the RVC, are you going to evaluate what the impact and the cost to the industry and the wider public would be from African horse sickness? Because I think all the discussions about the vaccine development at the moment is emphasis on government and regions like Europe to carry the cost, but I think the horse industry needs to wake up and think what it's going to invest in this as well.
Yeah, the answer is yes. All the economic implications of developing a DIVA vaccine will be thoroughly analyzed, and I think all this data will be very useful for vaccine manufacturers to actually address the question of whether this is for them profitable to invest in the development of these new vaccination strategies, and of course to the equine industry. So the answer is yes.
Peter, you want to ask a question? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, really following on from Simon's point, for the blue tongue outbreaks that have occurred, we've really been catching up with the vaccination. We've vaccinated a long time after the virus had come in and really been established. And I just wonder, you know, what perhaps the model might be if we had a vaccine bank available immediately and we recognized an outbreak, say, of African horse sickness, and then we vaccinated within days, within a week of it first arriving. Would we stand a much better chance of controlling it as a small outbreak rather than having to chase it around Europe and really potentially lose a much larger number of animals? So again, I'm suggesting perhaps having a vaccine bank available, ready to go, might be a very important thing to do.
Just one point concerning BTV8. When it re-emerged last year, we had some cases in August, September in the center of France. So we wanted to vaccinate, but we had no vaccine available. We found some vaccine in Mérial. They had some vaccine in the freezer somewhere in Calais, but there was not enough doses to vaccinate the area where the virus was present. So that's why at the moment we vaccinate in emergency the animal which have to be exported or the animal for reproduction, but we cannot vaccinate because we have no vaccine. And probably now it's too late because the infected area is now very large. We have no winter, we have culicoides even in the center of France, so it will be complicated. So I agree that we really need to be very fast and vaccinate very rapidly, but we need the vaccine for that.
I would like to make a comments about your question, Peter. I think I absolutely agree as well, because we prove it that it's very important two things: the early detections and the early action. Not only the detection, also the actions. In the case of African horse sickness, we are a little masochist because we are good for the early detections, but not for the early action. So that means that this is a big disaster, because as much the disease is running, more difficult to stop it. In particular, if there are other animals affected. For example, the biggest problem in blue tongue in the case of sheep in some areas of Spain is that it's already affected wildlife. And there is a reservoir, so you have to keep vaccination all the time, otherwise the disease coming again. In the case of African horse sickness, we don't have so much that potentially, but still is a possibility with some species that they can be infected and not show anything. So I think it's very important to have the vaccine. And probably the best procedure to start now could be just to decide that which one are the ones that have more possibilities, more scientific possibilities to make a trial, a relatively big trial, experimentally big trial, but in field conditions. That means make the experimental in the laboratories, but with some particular simulation or simulations to the field situations, and see which one of them could be really the candidate. And later move to the bank. And in between, we probably can have an inactivated vaccine that is very easy to produce, is very well, the technology is very well established, and probably the possibility to produce several different serotypes depending on the risk for the introduction. And I think this is probably the best way to be safe in Europe.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
Very short.
Very short. Just I was going to add to Peter's question that it is obvious that a vaccine bank would be ideal. I mean, the technology is there. I mean, to develop this type of vaccines, the diagnostics are there, so it is achievable. The objective is achievable. I would like to point out as well that in the Portugal outbreak of African horse sickness, they had a previous warning of what happened in Spain, and they put in place all possible control measures. And in the end, they had to vaccinate the entire population against African horse sickness. So, you have to tackle all these problems, from the start and very quickly and very effectively. Otherwise, the cost of the outbreak could be enormous.
Stefan, can I offer one other thought there?
Very short.
If we did a vaccine bank for blue tongue, you would have to have 29 different vaccines, so it would be very expensive. African horse sickness, well, there are only 9, so it would be perhaps less expensive to do it. And I think that's just a bit of positive spin on it.
Yes, you are totally right. Harv, you want to comment something?
Thank you. I can only say we tried this way to go, and we were pretty close to have one. Of course, the life attenuated for various reasons. It's the one described in the OA code. In fact, the one available at the moment without further development, but in monovalent. And we had a budget of 500,000, and at the end, and in fact, everything was agreed on this. And when it came to the proof, suddenly the price rose 10 times, and it was, of course, out of budget. So this is like things may happen, and then it was dead because the attempt failed, and then there was no support anymore. Now it's back on the agenda. The CVOs have discussed this also on the initiative of the CVO of the UK, which is much appreciated. And I know that in a couple of laboratories, people are working or have developed these seed strains, let's call it like this. It's certainly not yet a finished seed strain, but basically they have the individual serotypes ready. And the question would be, and they are ready to offer them to, some of them even free of charge, to vaccine producers. The question is who will take the next step. So that's why I think we have certainly good ideas about sophisticated vaccines, which have all their merits and something for the future. But the easy, simple thing for the immediate response now, until we have all these very sophisticated vaccines, would be that somebody takes over and says, okay, I will go ahead and be ready to produce, in case of an outbreak, a monovalent, inactivated vaccine of this and this serotype. So we have the chance. We do not need necessarily a marketing authorization. It's always questionable for a bank, because people say, but if you store it, then you have time to produce a dossier. There is some pros and cons for this. But in fact, the legislation allows to use a vaccine that has not a European marketing authorization. For example, we have lumpy skin, and we are vaccinating against lumpy skin with a vaccine, live attenuated, from South Africa. It's used in food-producing animals with no problems. Nobody will discard all the vaccinated animals afterwards. They will all be eaten, and the cheese will be consumed, and so on. So there is a possibility that is in the legislation. We can use this certainly. So only we need somebody who says, okay, I have the 9 serotypes. I make a vaccine. I know how to produce. And in case of, we can immediately reactivate, and then according to a recipe, we mix whatever we need, and then we have the vaccine. But there is no one so far who has volunteered to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Alf. And Richard, I'm very sorry, but we are out of time. You can ask your question during the lunch, because we really have to go to the lunch. Sorry for that. And it is a good thing also that the EU concludes the discussion. Before, I really would like to thank all the speakers, and perhaps I will give a specific thank to Alan, because Alan Guthrie arrives this morning from South Africa and leaves tonight to South Africa. So imagine, with a strike in Paris, so it's fantastic. And so thank you very much to everybody. I think we can thank again the speakers. Thank you very much.